Good morning, it's Laura here, and I'm back for another Fun Fact Friday talking about home organization. So I'm here representing Your Last Resort Home Organization Staging and Solutions, and this is our business here in the Annapolis Valley helping you to get organized. One of the things that we'd like to do is to give you some tips on what you can do at home to help organize your heirlooms, and is what we're going to be talking about today. We all seem to have, or our parents have, or our grandparents have, a lot of heirlooms, and the question then becomes, what do we do with them, these sentimental things that are part of our family? And this is a question that we're constantly facing within Your Last Resort, and when we're decluttering our own houses, what do we do? So the first thing, the first stage of this is kind of collecting your stories and recording those stories of what those heirlooms are for future generations. So that's kind of what I am going to be talking about today, and we'll do a couple series of different videos of different aspects about it. So today, as I say, we're going to talk about heirloom management and how you can record those stories and keep your information about your heirlooms all together. So the first thing that you can do is to go around your house, and on each item that is of sentimental value or actual value in your house, you can put a dot, like a sticky dot on the back of your item, and then correspond that by putting a number on it. So we might take a dot and we put the number 1. Then you can go into a computer system, such as I love using Excel. I use it for everything. So you could go into Excel, and then with number 1, you could write the notes, or even in a Word document, you can write the notes about what that item is. So item number 1 is Grandma's tea set, and you can tell your story about that. So that way, when you're gone, or your family's wondering what are the stories behind these items, you can look it up in your reference chart. So that's the first way. But it's also not a sure way, because as my mom pointed out to me too, is that those dots can fall off, especially if they get dusty and they're there for a while. So you want to make sure that they're on good and strong. I should also mention too, a big shout out to my mom, Lana Churchill, for letting me come into her house today to talk about family heirlooms and to use some of her things that is part of our family. So thank you. And so if you see me in a different location, that's where I am. I'm at my mom's house. Okay, so we've talked about dots. Another way you can do it is a little bit more old school. It's like with photographs. My mom said she's seen lots of people with photograph albums with a picture of your item with a description right beside it in an actual album, and you print off the pictures and have the stories written, maybe slid in with a cue card in an actual photo album. You can also do that digitally as well, or if you're using the Word or Excel. So to have a picture of the item along with the story, and that way you're not losing dots or getting confused or having a labeling system for that. Now, my grandmother was an amazing woman, not just because she really was an amazing woman, but she was very organized, and she had a lot of beautiful family heirlooms, and she has passed on that love of heirlooms, treasures to me too. So I love old family things. But what my grandmother did, and we're discovering this more and more. She's passed away probably about 12, 13 years ago now. So inside of a lot of items here at my mom's house, we have found little pieces of paper. And my grandmother has put inside on these pieces of paper what they are. So made from birch bark, porcupine quilts. This was great grandmother Moise's box, and she has all of the dates. So inside of that, you can see that she's got that labeled. She did a lot of handiwork as well, and you could see on the back that she has labeled everything on the back of all of the pictures from her house as well. So it tells you who made the picture, what date, and any other family information about it. And that's on the back. She's actually written on the back of most of those pictures. Another way she's done it too is that on the bottom of many pieces, my grandfather was did a lot of woodworking, so he made a lot of these pieces, and she has labeled them on the bottom with a sticker made by George Lewis, 1970, and the type of wood it was with. So everything is labeled. And then the final piece too, this is my special heirloom. It's the Elizabeth cup, and I am the 7th generation to receive this because my name is Laura Elizabeth, so it's passed down through the first female line of all of the families since the 1700s. And all of that information my grandmother has recorded with all the dates and information, and it's kept inside the cup because we're not going to remember all of that information. So that is an easy way just to tuck the stories in inside of the item itself, just to keep those. Now, the biggest tip that I have for organizing information about family heirlooms is something that we did at my grandmother's house probably 15 years ago before she died. My mom and my sister and I and my grandmother spent a day creating this. And I am going to actually flip this around, and so I can show you my computer and what we've done. So we created a PowerPoint presentation of all of my grandmother's items. So we took pictures, my sister took the pictures, and then we slotted those into PowerPoint, and then beside it we have the information about the story that my grandmother dictated, what that information was. So we have so many things all recorded here. So when my grandmother died, we actually knew these stories and what part of the family they were from. And so when we were dividing up all the heirloom treasures, we kind of had an idea. So, and we had the story, and we did that while my grandmother was still alive. And I've actually since started doing that with my own things, realizing that nobody else in my family is going to know the stories behind these things. So it's a great way. I mean, it did take some time during to be able to set this out and put it all together, but it was definitely worth it, and we are so happy that we did. And if this is something that you're interested in having done, that is something that Your Last Resort can come in and help you with as well, and putting together these systems to help record these stories. So that was with my grandmother's things, but the other thing is that I'm going to show you here is that my family are huge quilters on both sides of my family, so we have a lot of quilts. So this is just something that we're starting to do, but it's the same kind of system that we took a picture of the quilt, and beside it we wrote down the description of who made it and what time period it's from, or what the pattern is, so that we have a recording, because we have so many family quilts. My mom has also started pinning an index card to each of the quilts in her house here that shows who made it and what the time period was. So that is a great way of keeping track. And again, I said I use PowerPoint to put these together and to keep all of these stories together. And it was a huge help because you think you're going to remember these stories, but in reality, the chances of you remembering these stories is not always the case. So it's great to have that all recorded. Again, we can come in and help you set up that if that's something that just seems a little bit too daunting for you. One of the big things that we hear a lot about is china and dishes. Their dish hutches are full. We don't know what to do. The next generation doesn't want our fancy dishes and family heirloom china. So what do we do? So your first step is I'm talking about is first of all how to store it, because I know a lot of people are saying their dish hutches are full and they don't know what to do. So make sure you're storing it properly. And actually I'm going to go and we're going to do a full series on proper way of storing china and storing family heirloom textiles and things like that too. So I'm just going to briefly touch on that today, but we are going to do a full series on how to do that. So I'm going to flip the camera around again one more time and show you these wonderful storage units here. I think I got these from the Regal catalog, but when I was searching online, I saw them everywhere from Amazon to Walmart, Bed Bath and Beyond. All of those kind of have them. You just call them china protectors. So what they are is they just keep them nicely stored. And these are my other grandmother's cherry dishes, which I love. They're not valuable. I think she even just got them at the gas station, but I love them so much and I do use them. So it just comes with a piece of foam. You put the foam between each of the layers. What I've done then on top is you can see that I have labeled with a sticker here on the top saying 4 large bowls, 4 small bowls, and they are the cherry pattern, so I don't have to root around and figure out what is in there. It's all completely labeled. The other thing that I've done too to label my china when storing it as well is I have created a, again in Excel, I created a table of each of the sets of dishes that we have and how many pieces of each thing we have, so that we know the entire contents of what our china is. And there you could also list what your stories are of your china. That's possible too, but that kind of keeps it straight in your mind. What do you have? How much do you have? And it helps you just to go through it. So I'm going to come back here and talk a little bit more about china. So again, I've been talking to a lot of people about what do they do with china, especially when you don't want it. I talked to one woman who told us this fantastic story. I absolutely loved it, that I want to share with you, is that her mom has a set of china dishes in her dish hutch, and neither of her daughters who want the china, and they have no space for it, and they just are not interested in having it. So what that family did is they had what they called a blessing of the dishes, and this was a meal. They had a big fancy meal on the dining room table. They used all of the dishes, and in the Marie Kondo style, they thanked the dishes for being part of their family life, and then they were able to let them go. So that is a great way just to kind of celebrate them, take a final picture, and just to make, again, it's called the blessing of, they called it the blessing of the dishes. And I love that story, to use it before you let them go. So the thing is too, I've been talking to a lot of auctioneers and antique dealers, and the situation is that China especially is not really selling a whole lot in the marketplace these days, and certainly not for the value that you are probably hoping to receive from them. Things are only as valuable as people want them. So it is, and I talked to the China place down in Wilmot, and they're not accepting any China at all because the stock is just not moving. So if you are looking to sell your China and your heirlooms, you'll have to be willing also to let it go, and maybe not for the price that you are hoping for. If that is something that you want to do, you can try to sell. So I also spoke with another person who does a lot of antiques, and what he said to me, and it maybe goes against our decluttering concepts, but what he said was that to keep the dishes, to keep them, store them away, but keep them. Trends change so quickly in terms of what's important, or so everything. Right now, we're kind of in a minimalism trend right now, but we don't know. Maybe the heirlooms will come back in, and maybe they will be of value again to you and to your family. So he suggests not getting rid of them right away, but storing them properly. And again, this is something that we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks, about how to properly store these so that they can take up less space. But the other thing is too, and been talking to a lot of people about this, especially on through Facebook conversations, is to use them. If you have these dishes, Let's use them. Life is too short. I had a post up on our page the other day about burning our good candles. Use your good dishes. One person wrote in and said that they use their good china dishes as their regular dishes. And yes, they put them in the dishwasher. They're enjoying them. Life is short. If they're going to sit in a box, they're of no value. So just use them and appreciate them. And maybe not just for Thanksgiving and for Christmas or as what you do, but just get them out and use them. Another suggestion was to kind of repurpose them. So if you have, I think they're called the terrines, vegetable servers or something, why not put a plant in it or put a teacup on your dresser and use that for your knickknacks or your hairpins or whatever, little jewelry pieces or whatever. So you can repurpose those china pieces, and that they are out and they are being used, being remembered, and being loved. And that way they're not seen as something that is taking up space, and you are honoring your family and your traditions. But say yes, they may get damaged or faded a little bit in the dishwasher, and if that's a risk you're willing to take, well, at least you're using them and they are getting loved, and it's better than sometimes being in a box or selling them on. So just really want you to think about that as well with your china dishes. So kind of went on a tangent there, but really wanted to talk about, and just summing up, saying that it is important that if we are keeping our heirlooms, that we have a system to write down the stories behind that. And the other thing is too, which is not always a pleasant topic or easy topic to bring up with your family, but is estate management. And often those conversations are easier to have while your loved ones are still living, about who gets what and how are you going to manage that system. So are you going to use a dot system? I have heard people put on colored dots, one for each child of who they want, much like how I talked earlier about storing the information. You can also store in that same chart where you have the family story, who gets it, who's interested in that, and that will solve a lot of issues as well. And then whoever does receive that item can have the story and the information behind it too. So it's good to have that kind of laid out first. So I highly recommend the PowerPoint system that our family did, taking pictures and recording those stories before it's too late, getting those oral history stories from the family members who know. So it is all part of our heritage and makes us who we are. So let's celebrate that and use the good dishes. So those are the kind of things that I wanted to highlight on. And as I keep saying, in a couple of weeks, I'm hoping to convince my sister-in-law to come on and do a whole series on storing our textiles and how to properly store our china so that none of this gets damaged. And next week, we're going to be talking with Celine Hamling, and she is really a minimalist, living minimalistically with her family. And we're going to talk about how you can do that with children in the house and what that means. And so if you have any questions you want me to chat with Celine about, you can send those to me too. So if you found the information helpful today, please give a like on the video, and also please share it to anybody else who you think might find the information useful as well. And I just hope you go out and go through your things, see what you still love, see what still brings you joy, but also write down those stories and to keep the history going. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. And if you need more information or need help with any of this, reach out to yourlastresort.ca, or you can find us on Facebook under Your Last Resort as well. And we are happy to come help you organize your heirlooms, label things, or help you declutter and help you to pass on this stuff if that is what you want to do too. So always happy to help, and always happy to hear from you. So thanks for tuning in, and catch you next week.